Hello，大家好，欢迎大家来到 Link Open Mic 我们的 Link 开放麦。今天为什么用英文开头呢？因为我们终于又迎来了我们新的一位海外嘉宾。那今天呢，稍微有一点点迟因为我们的网络问题，所以谢谢大家的等待。今天我们邀请到的嘉宾呢，是来自于英国的一个非常小众的赛道的品牌。大家不知道有没有听说过适应性时尚，这是一个比较专业的名词。当然我相信在中国互联网已经有了很多的讨论。那我们在搜索所有优秀的品牌的时候呢，我们就注意到了英国的一个叫做 Unhidden 的品牌。所以我们当时看到他在为很多的残障人士在设计的时候，我们就非常兴奋。所以我们今天呢也邀请到了创始人 Victoria 来给我们一起聊一聊这个我们并不是特别熟悉的一个领域。那我相信关注这场直播的朋友们也是充满好奇心的一批人。因为这个赛道在全世界范围内来说都是非常少的，所以如果有中国的品牌也在做这样的事情的话，我觉得这场直播会非常的有意思。那在介绍 Victoria 之前呢，我来先给大家介绍一下 Unhidden 和Victoria 本人。首先，它这个品牌呢，是首个加入英国时装协会适应性时尚品牌，而且它与我们比较熟知的零售巨头 Primark 有合作，也是走到了10个国家96个商店。大概率我们大概可以这么形容，就是真正的从小众走向了主流。那第二个呢，就是他们的设计理念是为所有人时尚。虽然我们今天讨论的重点是残障人士，但是其实他们的目标或者他们的期许以及整个适应性时尚的行业为之努力的都是为所有人设计。这个在我们之后呢也会好好的去聊一聊。那他本人待会儿可能大家也已经能看到了Victoria 已经能看到了，也是一个非常漂亮的女士。然后她本人是一位非常关爱残障人士的倡导者，也是一位 TED 演讲者。他在英国很多著名的论坛都有发表过演讲，以及传递过这个行业的一些知识和他自己个人的一些愿景。2023年的时候呢 Victoria 也是入选了 Vogue 25位最具影响力女性榜单。所以不管是创始人本人还是这个品牌，都是在整个商业洪流当中能够坚持初心，并且为一些小众人群发声的一个典范。所以我也不多说了，让我们来欢迎 Victoria。 Okay, Victoria, welcome to our channel Link Open Mic. I have used Chinese to introduce you and Unhidden a little bit, but I think it's much better if you can say something about yourself and your brand. So please.
Okay. Thank you so much for having me. I'm going to do my best to speak slowly because I do have a habit of speaking very fast. I founded Unhidden. Well, I registered it in 2017, but my background is I studied fashion design and I graduated in 2008. And I immediately went to work as an intern as a pattern cutter and then fell into being a garment technologist. And I worked for suppliers that sold to UK high street brands. And then I went to work directly with brands. And in the background to all of that became unwell. And some of that we're going to touch on later, which is what gave me the idea for Unhidden. Unhidden has now been trading for 5 years, and we've got some very exciting growth plans. And as you can see, I've had some other partnerships with some other global brands.
You said you worked in different brands and you have a rich career in fashion industry. So I'm really curious about that. So what is the pivot moment that make you decide create this brand only focus on the disability people?
Well, When I first became unwell, I had some life-saving surgery in 2012. But it was in 2016 that I was in hospital with another patient. I was there, I'd had some surgery. And she was there as a survivor of cancer, but she had two stomas and she had a line in her arm, and she was there to get a port into her chest fitted. And she said to me that she couldn't dress how she wanted to when she was at home, when she was in the hospital, at work, and going out. And at the time, I was working at All Saints, which I hope you have heard of. I was working there on the men's tailoring. But we had a conversation, and I got my laptop out on my hospital bed and had a look, because it felt very obvious to me that surely this must be a need that so many people have. And what I saw at the time was just very medicalized, very functional, didn't show a huge amount of diversity within the models. And it seemed very much designed from the point of view of a carer rather than the point of view of the person actually wearing the adaptive clothes.
Mm.
So I got headhunted by Victoria Beckham. So I left All Saints. But whilst that was an incredible brand to work for and the clothes are absolutely beautiful, it did highlight to me that I wasn't doing anything meaningful, and the idea just got stronger and stronger. So I eventually quit and went freelance so that I could pursue the research and development of Unhidden.
Oh, you made me remind a brand. I forgot the name, but they create clothing for people who live in the hospital, but not for disability people. It's different concept. They're beautiful, they are functional, but it's not very convenient for the people with different with his body. Is not convenient. So I guess your brand Unhidden is totally different from that brand. So you mentioned
No, sorry.
Yeah, you go ahead. Sorry.
I do want to do some hospital gowns, because as someone who's gone through a lot of abdominal surgery, the opening is at the back. So from a dignity point of view, you have to sort of either drop it down from your neck and expose yourself, or you have to lift it up, which is very uncomfortable, especially, and I have been on wards with women who are Muslim, so they have chaperones, but obviously for them to do that is deeply personal and offensive. And when we're already feeling vulnerable, we don't want to have to expose ourselves to strangers. So it is in the pipeline along the way, something else that I do want to work on. But yes, I want to start on day-to-day clothing, because that is something that is still such a growing but still very strong need.
Yeah. I don't know I don't know in the UK, but in China, we have massive people in the hospital. So sometimes you need to put your shirts off between the public,
Yes.
on the public. So a little bit embarrassing. So you mentioned so that's the point that you started your business or your brand. But I want to talk about the society environment that make you to develop brand. I don't know. Can you tell us the approximate number of disabled people in the UK?
In the UK, they say that there's roughly 14 million of working age. However, we have the issue of not everybody identifies as disabled. So it kind of relies on people identifying with that word, and a lot of people don't. It doesn't also include people who have learning disabilities who might not be part of a census when we're collecting and gathering data. So I think that the number is an awful lot higher, but at the moment it says it's 1 in 4 in the UK, and 1 in 5 used to be the old metric, but now we are finding like it's 1 in 4 globally.
I guess in China we almost have 80 million people are disabled, but
Wow.
many facilities is not accessible to them, especially for example the blind path. And we have a lot of bicycles, so the blind paths are often blocked. So
Yes.
don't even mention the clothing. Nobody think about them. So that's the meaning of hidden exist.
Yes,
Unhidden.
I mean I think yes. I mean it's close to that here. I think we're getting a lot better about media representation, and I think traditionally we've been hidden away, which is why I called the brand Unhidden, because disability touches everybody at some point in their lives, whether it's somebody or whether it's a temporary disability like a broken arm or a broken leg or a small bit of surgery. And I know that it's in the UK 73% of consumers know someone with a disability, so there's an awful lot of us.
Wow.
And I think it's I think it's time that we take up the space that we should have always had and just normalize disability, because it is very normal to be disabled. It's not an exception, it is almost a rule. It will happen to everybody, especially if we're lucky enough to live older. But we're also living in a time of conflict and climate change, and those natural disasters are mass disabling. The pandemic was a mass disabling event. So there's lots of reasons why this type of clothing is only going to get more important and more relevant, I hope.
Especially we talk about the silver aging, so that's more important. We one day we will be older and even older. So not just for the disabled people, but for us also. So we always talk about your brand name, Unhidden. So what message does the name Unhidden convey to the customers, to the market? What is the creative from this name?
I mean, it's wonderful for me because this idea or the name came to me at 5 o'clock in the morning. I just couldn't sleep, and I was thinking about what I wanted this brand to mean to my community. And the disabled and chronic sick community have immediately understood why I call it Unhidden. Non-disabled people do ask, but it's self-explanatory to those of us in the community, because we are hidden away, we are silenced, and there was never any other name that came to me that I wanted to use for this brand. So I'm very lucky that my brain works that way. And at the time, I think there was a documentary that had just come out, and it was called Hidden: The Silenced Voices of Disability. So I thought, well, what do I want us to be? And I want us to be unhidden. I want us to have equal participation. So yeah, I still love the brand name, and I'm very proud to have been able to come up with it.
Yeah, that a good name is a good start.
Yes,
right?
And actually I saw an article by Virgil Abloh, who's a designer that died a few years ago, and he actually said that finding the correct brand name and knowing immediately that it completely captures your community, your niche, and your mission is the best kind of brand name there is. So I think I've ticked all those boxes with this one.
Yeah, this, sometimes I think this is a bold name, but also very, very control to respect everyone. It's a smart name.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. So let's back to the design, because when the design is the first, right? The first priority is the best part. So what is the core design principle for you? Not even for before you founded the Unhidden or Unhidden, what is the change different?
I think I've always kind of worked the same way. I always wanted things to fit well and fit properly, which is why my background is in tailoring. I think the fun thing or the interesting thing with Unhidden is sometimes we're breaking, pattern cutting rules, and factories have to learn why we're breaking them. Otherwise, they don't want to break those rules. So things like putting a dart on a hip so that it shapes the seam for a seated position, and just the shaping of risers, especially on trousers. They can't fathom the importance of it until they see the actual garment and see somebody wearing it, and then understand why I've done what I've done. For me, I always start with the shape itself and how do I want the wearer to feel, and how do I want it to look. So I sketch just a full range without worrying about how I'm going to make it adaptive. I look at the silhouette and the colours and the fabrics, and then I start to say to myself, okay, what would this person need if they had this condition? what would a wheelchair user need, what would someone with a limb difference need, and try and build as many of those in as I can. I am a huge proponent for universal design, because that means anybody can wear it, non-disabled people can wear it, and disabled people can wear it, which I think is probably about 80% of what I put out with both Primark Adaptive and with Unhidden. So, if you need the features that are built in, they're there, but if you don't need them, you don't need to use them, and you don't even notice them. And something that I think I find quite funny about Unhidden's development is a lot of the adaptations people can't see. So they are hidden adaptations, but they allow the wearer to live an equitable life. For example, I'm wearing this shirt and it's got an opening down the whole sleeve. I'll open it now.
So I got these pictures.
Yeah, okay. So if you're going through chemotherapy, radiotherapy, you're diabetic, or you have to give blood a lot, for whatever need, you can access your arm without taking the whole garment off. And that's another thing that I try and look at with my design process is dignity. So that, when we're already feeling vulnerable, we're unwell, we're facing so many other barriers, having to expose ourselves or be unable to dress ourselves is another layer. So all of our bottoms, as a standard, they have a loop on the inside so that somebody else can pull them up for you. Or if you can't do this movement, but you can do that, you can pull them up yourself. And we've had feedback from so many consumers. There's a 26-year-old woman who had been able to put her own jeans on for the first time. And just imagine getting to 26 and you've never been able to dress yourself. I think, and imagine you get even older. We do have a lot of feedback from people that wish it had been around for their grandparents or for their mum or for somebody else that they knew that needed it and didn't have it at the time that they needed it.
If you don't tell me, I never think of that is an adaptive clothing because it's so stylish.
Thank you. Well, that's the thing.
Yeah.
It's always looked very medical, and I wanted it to be stylish. And I think especially because the uniform of the disabled and chronic sick community, everyone assumes we're always in pajamas and we're always wearing tracksuits. And those things are true because we have no other choice. So if we can't wear the same as everyone else, we're going to be trapped in these clothes. And it's been a barrier for people for going for job interviews. If you can't dress for a job interview, you're not going to get that job. If you can't dress for a work presentation, you're not going to be chosen to do the presenting. So not being able to dress for appropriate environments has been another barrier. So that was the first one I wanted to knock down, was quite formal office attire. That's where we sort of started.
So if even though we talk about adaptive a lot today, but I think we think Unhidden too small. It's inclusive. Yeah, inclusivity, right? Not just about people, but different occasions, different places. So I can wear that t-shirt to the dinner, right?
Yes, exactly. I mean, this is actually a long one, so I've worn this as a dress, and I've just put a belt around it. There's so many different ways of bringing in adaptive design. And ways that people don't notice, I think it's an exciting challenge to have sometimes. And I know we're going to come to cost. Sometimes that is the biggest challenge. But, I think there's an assumption that we don't want or need it because people still assume, if you're disabled, maybe you don't work or go out. And obviously we do and we want to. But if we can't dress up, if we get invited to a wedding and all we can wear is a t-shirt and jogging bottoms, not very many people would choose to wear that to somebody's wedding. So the alternative is either wearing clothes that cause physical pain or discomfort or aren't appropriate, or paying more money to get something you've already bought that doesn't work for you to make it work for you. So I know there's I've met so many people who have somebody who sews, who they just, they'll open up a seam to add some more space in, they'll add extra fastenings, they'll change the fastenings. But again, it's another cost when we're already paying extra just to live the same lifestyles as everybody else. So having to always buy your clothes and then tailor them is not accessible for everybody in the community either. And just much as I love tailoring, I like people taking that step to make things fit them better. There is, it's always better when it is built into the garment rather than adding it on afterwards.
Yeah, but I cannot tailor by myself. I'm terrible.
But that's yes, not everybody can do it, but there are. I mean, in the UK, there are a couple of companies that you can say what you need them to do to the clothes, and they will pick them up, change them, and then bring them back. And I think that's a wonderful circularity model that I hope will be expanded globally. And actually, that touches on, a lot of people talk about fast fashion, ethical fashion, and sustainability. And as I've said to so many other companies that are doing really well in sustainability, but I say to them, there's no such thing as secondhand adaptive clothing. So we can't just go to a thrift store. We can't just go on eBay and buy pre-loved adaptive clothing because there isn't enough of it that exists. I would say on that, however, Tommy Hilfiger has been doing adaptive clothing since 2015. They just don't tell anybody. So you can probably find some of that on eBay, but that's about it.
Yeah. So take this shirt as example. So we know the thinking behind the design, but we want to know when you started to design this shirt, what is the first thing that you think about? Is the function at first, or the stylish at first, and based on the stylish, and you just do some change?
Yes, so I usually I start with the style of it first, and then I focus, okay, how can I make it either look the same so people can't see, which is why I have like a concealed placket, because there could be buttons under here. There isn't. So I use snap fastenings because they're a lot easier to do up than buttons. So we have no buttons on any of Unhidden's clothes because they are quite fiddly to use. Even having long nails makes doing up to small buttons really difficult. So it's again something that benefits more than just our community. Everything fastens with snaps. The same on the arms. I mean, this is an older version, so the updated versions will have less snaps because they're quite close together. So there's actually quite a lot of them. So we're going to take it. We're expanding the distance between the snaps so that it doesn't take as long. But it does mean that tubes can be fed through them and on the arms as well. So again, you can do everything back up, but you can still access parts of yourself. But yes, I always start with the style and then see how many conditions I can help with in one. I mean, this fabric is also lyocell, so it's a natural fiber. So from a sensory perspective, it's good. And a lot of people with disabilities have comorbidities. So there's a lot of skin conditions that can be linked either to medicine or treatment or the condition itself. So natural fibers are much better. So I always look at natural fibers and soft stretch fabrics as much as I can. And we also, from a sensory perspective, we don't have any back neck labels. We either try and print onto the fabric or we have tear away labeling, because sensory is becoming more and more sort of mainstream as well now. So it's another consideration. We try and remove any seams that sort of will touch against your skin. We try and have all the seams are flat, so there's you can't feel it when you're wearing it, basically.
So for the other clothing, do you use like neck knit to help replace with the button? What else solutions with that in your collection?
Okay. Well, I actually, for now, we only have snap fastenings. The reason for that is, I looked into magnets. They're exceptionally expensive because they're not that common. There are some companies now, there's a new one I came across literally yesterday called Soft Mag, and they've got some wonderful solutions. But the issue with magnets is that they don't necessarily lock. So they can very easily come undone, which if you're a larger person or you have a bigger chest, is not great. And it doesn't work for people who have a pacemaker. And there have been issues on runways where like coats have flipped open and they've stuck to the side of the wheelchair, exposing the model. So much as I do love magnets, and I think there is space for them, until they get a bit cheaper, it's very difficult for Unhidden to use it. But Primark adaptive, actually, we did on some of the zips. There are magnetic zips, so the bottom will lock together because it will find each other and lock, and then you pull the zip up, which is so fun and such a simple solution to just doing up coats and hoodies, whether you're dressing somebody else or dressing yourself. So there is room for it. Another alternative that people use is Velcro. I don't like it so much because Velcro doesn't last as long. So, well, because it just doesn't last as long. You can't put it you can't put it in a tumble dryer. So like the longevity of the garment is compromised immediately. And it just doesn't look, to me, it doesn't look that nice. That said, there are brands that do use Velcro, and that's their decision. I'm just not a huge fan of it. And because it does release a lot more microplastics. So that's another element where I'm like trying to be better than what exists and adapt. And sometimes you don't even need a fastening. It's actually having a wrap or a tie option, or just something that they can step in and out of. We do use zips that have like a ring pull, so it's circular, so that it's not too fiddly, or again, so that somebody else can put their finger through and do zips up. So all of our zips have ring pulls now. And that's another thing that we sort of made sure that we developed. The first trousers I had zips with the tiny little pulls on them, and the integrity of the zip itself isn't great. So these ones are a lot more robust, and they last because these garments get put through a lot, so they have to work well and have to last.
Is it harder to do a jeans than a top shirt? Because I think the jeans are a lot of parts that you must be considered for jeans, different.
Jeans. I mean, jeans are difficult for everybody. So I don't get too disheartened. But I did actually use in a TV show that I was in here a few years ago. We used the pattern from Unhidden for our first wrap trousers, but we made them in a stretch denim. They worked exactly the same way and they were fine. We just haven't put them into production. But Unhidden is going to be releasing some jeans in July, August. And we're doing a seated version for wheelchair users and a universal version, which I also did with Primark. So we have men's and women's jeans in both seated and universal design.
Well, I guess every collection must you put a lot of effort on it. So can you share with us a failure case that you have put so much hard effort but it doesn't work, and you don't launch the product finally?
I don't think there's too many. I can't think of one where we didn't launch it. I can think of ones where it didn't sell very well. And that depressingly to me is one of my favorites. We still have it in stock in all of the colors, and that is the chiffon shirt that's got like a pussy bow tie to it. I mean, I live in mine, and everybody borrows one off me, or it's one of our most requested PR samples, but nobody really has bought it that much. So which is, it's kind of, I try not to take things personally. But I think, it depends on people's taste. And I think also seeing it, we don't have a huge outreach program at the moment. So it's just, I think it's a question of reach. I would say on the original shirts, and this one included, the amount of snap fastenings, I had people with cerebral palsy who told me it was really difficult for them to do up. It's a lot easier for them to take off. Because you literally can just pull it apart, which is great, but actually getting dressed was still very difficult, which is why we've updated the trims that we use now. And it's a constant learning. I always do focus groups. I always ask for community feedback. I can't assume that I'm getting everything right, especially with conditions that don't affect me. So I always make sure that I've spoken to more than one person that has these sort of dressing needs to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. But something I think the reason I like universal design is because there's no such thing as a 100% accessible product. What gives somebody else access might take it away for someone else. Someone with a sensory need is not going to like those loops on the inside. So we're trying to work on ways of how we can mitigate that risk. of irritation whilst still giving it to somebody else. So you end up having to break down into these different niches, which, again, we're still a small business, growing, but still quite small. So we're still having to sort of develop and wait until we can drill down and do even more specific design work for very specific conditions.
Yes, definitely. Every step it should be very careful, and because you put everything like 100% time and energy and everything in it, right? So you say that product is not, but for the first fashion model for your brand, I guess. But you also have many other, like on the picture, for these pictures, you have many other fashion models. So what kind of the role does this community, like users communities, play in your design process? What do you get from them?
Well, gosh, I get everything from them. They've been my greatest champions and source of inspiration. So Unhidden only works with disabled models. I don't, and I will never hire a disabled model. If we get to a point where disabled models are hired at the same rate, fine. And I do get non-disabled models requesting to work for me, but they can get dressed. And it is a challenge when I get approached by someone with a disability that doesn't need adaptive clothing. I still try and represent them, but if they don't actually need the clothes, that's a bit of an issue. So in these images here, there's Tyler who's wearing a hoodie, and in my last runway show,
In the middle one?
At the other end.
Oh, okay.
And the sequins that say "not a burden" are actually made from my medical tablets. I cut them into circles and turn them into sequins. And he does wear a prosthetic. He's a gym teacher, and he does squats one-legged. He's an absolutely incredible man. But he doesn't necessarily need adaptive tops, but he might need adaptive shorts or even underwear that works around what is remaining of his right leg. Tilly, who's in the middle photo, she's got 2 bionic arms. So her arms actually stop here. So for her, buttons are not going to happen. Like, bionics are getting very good, but they can't do buttons. So she could pinch the shirt closed, but she could not have got into a shirt with buttons. And she's wearing the very first wrap trousers that I brought out as well.
I think your design, the challenge that you're facing is more than the normal designers.
Yes, it's quite a vast community, and I get asked all the time, why do you do just one disability? And I could have gone down that road, and some people have, but it was important to me to do as many as I could, mostly to prove that it's possible. We have dresses that have a concealed opening across the front, so if you've got a stoma, you can empty your stoma bag without having to take your clothes off. All of the pockets have just a button hole inside the pocket, so tubes can be fed through rather than over. And these are really small changes that anybody can do. Yes, sometimes there are extra fastenings, and that does come at a cost, which I know we're going to come to. But I didn't want to be exclusive, I didn't want to exclude anyone. I mean, I had advice after launching that I should have just launched with one gender. And one type, either a shirt or a trouser. And I thought, we're already so late to designing this kind of clothing. I'm going to do 5 for men, 5 for women, and we're going to go from there. And I'm glad that I did do that, because otherwise you can get very pigeonholed. And we have had equal sales for men and women, but a lot of the time I think it has been women buying for men as well. So it's quite hard for us to know, because we still have, especially in the UK, as I mentioned, stigma around disability earlier, but that's definitely even more of a stigma around being a man and being disabled. So even though our sales have not reflected that, we always sell half and half of both. But I do think sometimes we even sell, both to one person because they're buying for both genders.
Oh, that's lovely. This is my first time to know that for when you're doing the half and half sailing, and that's another sport for the disabled people, I think.
Yeah.
Right. And you mentioned we mentioned the design a lot, so I prepared a challenge for you.
Yes.
I know it must cost more than 5 minutes or longer, but I have to request you just have 1 or 2 minutes to change this dress. So tell me the dress.
Is this, I can't
Yeah,
see, is this for people watching or for me?
I will share with you a dress. I will share. Sorry, I cannot share with you at the moment, so you can just say like this.
Okay.
So it's just very normal gray dress, right? So what will we do to make it easier to wear for disabled people or disability people? And tell me why. So you just tell me, and they will say what you want to change. For our audience, we will say.
Okay.
Is it clear?
It's clear. If I can't see the dress, it's going to be, I'll go through my processes and hopefully we'll get there. So I'll start from the top and work down. The neckline, I would have a look at how wide it is. So that if you can't pull something over your head, you can step into it. And that's something that, if you've got a frozen shoulder or you don't have arms, there's so many different ways of getting in and out of garments. So we'd start there. Another reason for having a wider neckline is if someone has a cochlear implant, that quite often can get dislodged. So if it stretches or they can pull their head through without it touching their face, their head, that's also another reason for doing that. I don't know whether it has sleeves or not, but if it doesn't,
just like a t-shirt.
sorry, I didn't catch that bit. I'll just keep going. So if it has sleeves, I would either put a zip in at the neckline again so that they can be undone so somebody could step in, or depending on the sleeve length, would have a zip so that they can access their arms again if they're going through any kind of treatment or have regular medical appointments. It also can help just to detach from the front and back for someone who's a paraplegic, so that they can access various parts of their body again without having to take the whole garment off. Going further down the dress, I would probably have a concealed zip across the front that has a zip either side, because stomas can be placed in a variety of places across your middle. So if it opens from both sides, it sort of means that you've got more access to it so that the stoma bag can be emptied. And sometimes I actually will use a tie to cover that zip, or a concealed placket, or even just have a lot of ruching down the side so that the seam isn't as noticeable. I would then put openings also in the side seam so that tubes can be fed out through the side. And I would add pockets, because pockets, everybody needs them anyway, but they are also helpful for people who have medical devices. A pocket, we have all of our pockets at the right size for someone who has an insulin pump, or somebody that uses a TENS machine, or somebody who's got some kind of trial medical apparatus, usually to do with their heart. So that can go into the pockets. The pockets themselves would also have a buttonhole opening for tubes to be fed through. And then depending on the length of the dress, we'd either put slits into the side so that when you're sat down, the hem isn't sort of pulling your legs together if you're a wheelchair user. Or again, we would use snap fastenings or a zip so that you can choose whether or not to have them open or not. I would do everything I could to keep any seams off the back so that you're not going to get any pressure sores, you're not going to get any sensory difficulties. And I would, where possible, try and make sure that it's in a soft, natural, breathable, stretchy fabric.
So Victoria, how many hours have you stayed in hospital per day? I guess you must observe a lot of people, and then you can come up with so many ideas that's
Oh,
so
yes.
specific.
Yeah, I mean, I think one time I had a catheter bag after a surgery, and that's something I'd never
Yeah,
experienced before. So I was like, right, let's road test. What would I need? And I mean, pants and underwear were one of the biggest issues when I had that, but also trousers was a complete no-go. But I have actually now worked on that, and actually in the Primark adaptive range, we have some cargo trousers where you can put the bag into a pocket that's against your leg. So it's held in place, it doesn't move around, and you can go about your day and nobody would know it was there. So it's really helpful for me to go through it. But yes, to be in hospital and to ask all of the patients around me, doctors, and I have mixed reactions from, but the nurses always understand. And we had
yeah,
somebody from a very big cancer charity did a huge post about the Primark adaptive range because they could suddenly wear a hoodie because chemotherapy wards tend to be quite cold. So everyone sat there in t-shirts with
mm.
blankets and things. And it was the first time she'd been able to wear clothes and just have it hooked up and she was warm. It's just really simple things like that.
So
But yes, I
even now
spent a lot of
you,
hours in hospital.
yeah. So even now you have founded Unhidden, but you still keep the habit to observe the patients, or you visit hospital a lot during the week because that helps you
um,
design, right?
I do have to go to hospital a lot myself, yes. And I also, I've made through the development of Unhidden, I have made lifelong friends. All of the
Mm.
models from the very first
Oh,
photo shoot, I still speak to. Some of them have gone on to work for Primark and other fashion designers, or they're advocates in their own right now. So I always ask for feedback. And when I'm bringing out something new, I always show them and say, do you think this will work? Is this going to help? Because it's that constant feedback you really need. And we're developing kids wear at the moment. So, but with kids wear, I want it to help both the child themselves, but also if you're a disabled parent, you need to be able to dress your child if they can't dress themselves because they're very young. So there's even
yeah.
more elements to bring in, which is why co-creation with the disabled community is really important. I thankfully can jump over some of the hurdles because I have the lived experience of it. And also, my career itself is about how to mass produce fitted clothing. So while these present
Mm.
different challenges, I'm in a very good position to know, a wheelchair user could say to me, this is what they want it to do, but they don't know how to achieve it because they haven't studied design, they haven't studied making, whereas I have, so we can work together to make the solution.
Yes, yes. You mentioned the kids. So maybe your ultimate goal is from the kids to the elders, every age, everyone can enjoy the convenience and the beauty also of clothing, I think.
Yes, absolutely. And there are so many categories. Design touches every part of our lives. I would love to bring out homewares, just things that are ergonomically designed so they
Mm.
can be picked up. I really want to look at packaging because when we deliver things, not everybody can open them very easily or independently. So packaging is another sort of obstacle or barrier that I want to help work to overcome. Um, Things like footwear and shoes, really excited about, and I really want to work on those. We are looking at lingerie and swimwear, and I really, really want to work on sportswear. It's not a very fun fact, but at the last Paralympics, there were 78 countries, and only one of them, Canada, had adaptive sportswear for both the opening ceremonies and also to compete in. And a lot of athletes, Paralympic athletes, lose time or don't perform as well because they are forced into these uniforms by their countries that don't work for them and aren't tailored for them. So that's something I really, really want to work on.
Oh, this is my first time to know. I love sports. I focus on the sports a lot. So I will say that case after the live stream to know what it kind of like. Thank you so much.
No
Yeah,
problem.
I guess the next question you can answer me because the next question is now what's the biggest problem or challenge for Unhidden? I think one of is the, as you said, massive produce, right? But
Yeah.
what about else can you share with us?
So another issue that we have is something that I call digital ableism. So we we don't spend any money on advertising because there's two platforms. So I'm not sure if I'm allowed to mention them, but the one where we post all of our photos to, they made the disabled community a protected characteristic, which means we can't target them for marketing. So I can't target my own community. I would have to, I could target anyone that's looked at a cancer charity, but then I would only be targeting them. So then it gets so broad because I can't distinctly use the word disabled. So we don't waste our money with these platforms because we can't target them, but also any content that we do share is reduced in reach because the algorithm picks up that we're using the word disability. Or if we use any of the words around health and illness, our reach is suppressed. And also if we use alt text and if we use imagery. So one of our first ads that we tried to run was about one of the shirts, but it was on a wheelchair user. And it was flagged as we weren't allowed to use it because we were trying to sell medical equipment, which obviously we're not. So we had to appeal. And then they said, of course, yes, no, you can use this image. But we had to do that every time we tried to use an image or video, which is very time consuming. And if you get too many warnings, they can just block your ability to run adverts. And there was an American adaptive brand that was banned from advertising for 9 months because they kept having these rejected ads from their own imagery. So our biggest problem is still reach, which is why partnering with big brands has done a huge amount of help for us. But it's why I do a lot of outreach in PR and media, because that's kind of the only way that we can really get people to engage and find out about us. So that is still the biggest challenge. And then the second one, unfortunately, is cost. As a small business, we are not taking any stock risk at the moment. So we have to convince other brands to buy wholesale, which I'm very pleased to say they are, and they have. And we have a huge launch coming in July or August. But that's taken a really long time to persuade people to buy the product. But once that happens, I think it will just get easier and easier. And it's still overcoming people's own barriers mentally as well. Like we've seen disabled people want to shop in the same places as everyone else. So they don't always want to be singled out. The problem is if no one's doing that, they have to come to independent shops. And I think it's just finding that balance. And interestingly, we also have a lot of people that have said they, even though they like the stuff, but they're not disabled, so they don't want to buy it because they don't want to take it away from a disabled person. Whereas me as a small business owner, it's like, no, please buy it, because then we'll sell more, which benefits more people, and then we can develop more things. So the next year I think is going to be fun but challenging, but we have some incredible partnerships with some incredible global brands. I want to expand into more countries, and that's difficult as well because there are obviously some differences. So I'm looking to work with people in different countries to make sure that what we're offering works for that specific country and that culture. So there's a lot of challenges, and most of it is financial, because I want to do bridal clothing because that really doesn't exist. But obviously wedding dresses are very expensive. And the disabled community is 50% more likely to live in poverty. So I can't charge huge amounts of money for these clothing because people just simply can't afford it. That said, the assumption that we can't afford anything at all is also not very helpful. So it's a very fine line and a real tricky balance to navigate.
Is that one of the reasons that you mentioned yesterday, that you need to find out the cheaper supply chain because the price cannot be too high for those disability people? One of the reasons?
Yes, that's definitely been a hindrance. I think it's more hitting the minimum order quantities of specific factories. Like here in London, I could get 50 pieces made easily. But if I go to a much bigger factory, they wouldn't even take me on if I was only making 50 pieces. And when you only make in small quantities, the price is much, much higher because you get the bulk discounts when you're placing much bigger orders. So Unhidden was acquired by the brand group, which is parent company is called PDS, and they are a supply chain. So we have thankfully cut out a lot of the middleman here. So we don't have this, I don't have the same issue. It's just a bit slower, and we're still having to sort of fight against. They're still used to producing at much higher quantities than they are currently for Unhidden. But once we start rolling with one of our next partners, who will then hopefully be replenish ordering forever, we will start to hit those numbers. But it's possible. It's just, again, it's still a very new market. And the fact that Unhidden is still standing after 5 years, most companies don't last 5 years. So I know what's coming. So I can breathe a bit of a sigh of relief. And I've seen other adaptive brands in the UK that are younger, both in founder and how long they've been around. We are all benefiting from Primark having done adaptive, because now more people are aware of it, and other retailers want to get us involved with their collections and helping them. So it's overall had a really positive effect. And I think I've sort of been able to lead the charge. It's been a lot easier for the people coming after me to start working in a space, because I've made it a bit more acceptable, and I've, sort of done as much as I can to advocate for it.
Oh my God, so many difficulties, especially for the first time. The marketing problem that you faced, that's discrimination from the digital aspect, is, I never think about that, and that's unfair, to be honest.
Yes, it is. And they know it's a problem. I have tried to engage with them to say, please, can we have a conversation about this? I'm a clothing brand, first and foremost, and you're literally stopping me from being able to grow. I think, it's another part of the education piece. And I think that's also what Unhidden has done. It's not just about the clothes. It is also about educating people about why we need it, why other brands that have done it and have failed, why they didn't manage to make it work. And that's always because it was so hard to reach people, or we're literally stopped from reaching people. So there's so many barriers into it, but it does make me very flexible as an entrepreneur, as a founder. So it's a good challenge. It's just, I've been talking about this same issue with these same platforms for 6 or 7 years, and nothing has changed. So, I mean, apart from AI, which is just another way to ignore the disabled community. But I think we're going to come to that topic in a second as well.
Do you ever consider the Chinese social media to promote, like, by itself? You don't just put money on it, like Xiaohongshu or Douyin, or like a Chinese version of TikTok? I don't know.
I mean,
Have you ever think
but
about
I'm
it?
definitely going to have a go now. If you could send me any recommendations, obviously we have to concentrate on where we are for now, but the expansion is there. We definitely want to. So yes, please let me know anywhere that you could think of.
From my perspective, I think Unhidden is really suitable for Xiaohongshu, because it's a platform that needed by most of humans. So they are caring about the disability people a little bit more than men, I guess. And that's another topic. I can give you more content about that after the live stream. But yeah, I believe Unhidden is designed to be promoted better, much better than now. Yeah, and you mentioned AI. I'm also very curious about that. What do you think the intersection part for adaptive fashion and between and the new take were like AI or smart fabrics? Because you use the natural fabric you mentioned, but I don't know what do you think about it.
So I'll start with the fabric. So we are looking at, and Primark, we have developed a fabric called Drop Lock. So it will absorb liquid, but it won't go out the other side. So kind of like essentially, menstruation wear, or, once you've had a baby, sort of clothes that don't leak. But we are looking at using that in other ways. We're looking at using fabrics that sort of regulate your body temperature, because not every, people with disabilities they're either too cold or too warm, and they actually can't regulate their temperature. So we're trying to develop fabrics that help for both of those things. I also love a bit of sparkle, but it's not very sustainable. So we're trying to find ways of using sequins or adding something with a bit of color, because we don't get very much of that. When it comes to AI, unfortunately, at the moment, I'm fairly anti it from a disability point of view. When it comes to creativity, we have had someone suggest, why don't we just use AI to do a photo shoot? And I, well, we don't hire disabled models anyway, so then we're really not hiring them, and we're not even paying. It's just another way to exclude rather than force studios, because most photography studios are not accessible either. So we're not hiring disabled models, we're not making spaces accessible, we are cheating by using AI, and we are doing creatives out of work. I also, I work with disabled photographers, disabled videographers, disabled content and social media people. All of that, if I gave that all to AI, that's a lot of people out of work that already don't get enough jobs. So Unhidden will never use AI for its creative. We might use it for scheduling meetings and for note taking, and that's about as far as it's going to go for now. I can't foresee a point where I'm going to change my stance on that, because it's just at the moment, it is just another form of exclusion.
That's a new perspective. If you use AI and your friends, your either the loyalty community will lose their jobs.
Yes. And people will see it, and I've already seen other disability advocates or designers get into a lot of trouble for using AI because it's not accessible. It is taking away our opportunities. When we're talking about it from a creative standpoint, I think in corporate life, in other industries, I think there's room for it. It's just not something that I think is there around adaptive and disability and inclusive led design.
Yeah. So you mentioned you made several younger adaptive brands together to make this field grows or much bigger. So what do you think the most crucial step for this group, the adaptive brands group?
I think crucially for all of us is to keep going and to I mean, the problem I have now is obviously I have contracts, and Unhidden is owned by other people who make the decisions. So I can't publicly always discuss and name all of the other adaptive brands, but I do my best behind the scenes to either make an introduction or to give advice if they want it. I mean, some of them are blazing a path. They don't need any of my help or support. But I think the most vital thing for all of them is to always bring in disabled people. You can't do it on your own. And I think some of the younger brands, they've not worked at other fashion brands. And I think that's something that needs to happen as well. I've grown up in this industry. I've been in it for 16, 17 years now. So I know where a lot of the problems are. I know a lot of the attitudinal problems that there are, and especially around factories, because factories have never done this before. So they usually argue and say, no, we don't want to use snap fastenings, we want to use buttons. And I have to explain, but we're never using buttons. And once they understand why, they love it and they get on board with it. I actually had one of the garment professionals that sewed some of the Primark adaptive. They found me on LinkedIn to say that it had been one of the best things they've worked on in their career, and that it was helping them and their family, which is incredible. So again, it's staying with the community, making sure you're always getting feedback, never assuming anything, and also being open to making mistakes. I've made a fair few, and I'm sure I will continue, because nobody is perfect. But I think because we are so far behind in this area, that everyone, the community wants everything now. And if you don't do it perfectly, they get very upset. So it's a lot of, you have to stay in touch with your community at all times so that you can be transparent. I think that's probably the biggest thing that any fashion brand, whatever kind of brand you are, is to be really open and transparent about your values, where things are being made, why you're doing them, and who you've brought in to support you doing that, so that people know you're not just in it for the money or to exploit a community, which is sometimes what people say. And I had that when I first launched Unhidden, and the prices were a bit higher. People accused me of exploiting a community because they didn't know that it wasn't a very big company. When I first launched, I wanted Unhidden to look really professional and really slick. And it did, but that meant people thought there was maybe 20 people working there. And I had to say, no, it's just me. I do the marketing, the social media, the design, the factory, like all of it. And then people were a lot kinder, but there is still that mindset of anything that's made for the disabled community. If it's made so expensive they can't afford it, then it's no good. And I think there's still a few of those battles ahead because things are costing more to produce, and tariffs and import and export is also getting very expensive. So all of these things I don't want to pass on to the consumer, but I might have to. I will say what I liked about what Primark did was we took their best sellers and I told them how to make them adaptive and how to build it, to reuse those blocks and change them. But they were committed to nothing costing any more money than the non-adaptive versions. I think there's only two, and it was the trench coat, where they were £2 more than the originals. So they were very committed. It did mean their margin was less, but they were also making in a volume that meant that they could afford to do that. Whereas me, with my small volumes, we're always going to be somewhere between the higher end. No one will ever be as cheap as Primark, for example, because they produce in such volumes that unless I suddenly have 430 stores globally, I'm not going to ever hit that low price point.
So for like Primark, the collaboration, is there any other support that can help that? Or is there any policy support or anything that you can tell us that could help this field grow from the UK, the government, or the?
Yes, I think the government would help. They're not, in the UK, they're not great about disability. So I don't hold my breath. And I've worked with the government on how they can support disabled entrepreneurs. And the group that I was working with, we went on to make changes, but there hasn't been a policy change. Actually, what I would like is the British Fashion Council, which Unhidden is a member of. I would like them to make it a policy that everyone showing at every fashion week, 1 in 4 of their models has to have a disability, because I don't think any brand is going to do it unless we make it a policy that you won't be allowed to show unless you do that. So that's one of my big hard-hitting goals, and they do know that because I have told them. So hopefully that's something I will be able to push through in the next couple of years.
You mentioned goals. Our last question is about what's your ultimate goals?
Oh, my ultimate goal is the mission statement is to normalize inclusive design. So just that it's something that's standard everywhere. Every brand considers us and includes us in some way, shape, or form. Me personally, I would really like to see Unhidden have its own standalone stores that would be managed by people with a medical background and also a retail background, make them into community spaces and be able to share that with other brands, maybe working in tech or accessories or footwear, so that it's kind of a one-stop shop for everybody. I'd also, it might sound a bit strange, I would like to have an accessible spa, just somewhere that people with disabilities can go and still have that luxury and that experience, because that doesn't really exist either. I would like to look at interior design and home design. I think just the world is kind of my oyster when it comes to this, because so much of it hasn't been done. So I'd like to do that. And we'll just see, I suppose. I don't feel the need to grow to such a point that I'm, a billionaire. I don't want that for myself. I just want the community to get what they need by any means possible. I would like to do a lot more costume design, especially as we are now starting to see more disabled actors get represented. So I'd love to work in costume, because I have done that in the past. So we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see, because when you talk about this, you're so excited, and I can say that that's your achievement. Not me. Just provide the best inclusive design for everyone, not just for disability people. we talk about that as a topic today, but that's not our goal, right? Our goal is for everyone.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And just to the point that, anyone feels represented and feels seen and can wear clothes and get dressed easily and comfortably. That should be the starting point for any fashion retailer.
I got one problem from the audience that they didn't say the winter clothing, the winter collection. So is that the biggest part, the very hard part for design?
Yeah, I think outerwear is a huge challenge because it is more expensive. So we developed and we have samples of outerwear, and we can't afford to produce them at the moment. But I'm very much hoping that we'll be able to. But I think it's one of those, we had to start somewhere. But if there were to be a brand that came out now that only did outerwear, they would do very well. And there are some that are sort of starting to come out. For wheelchair users, a lot of their coats, if it stops here, then their legs get wet, or if it's not waterproof, then those legs are still going to get wet, and they're sat in a puddle. So there's lots of different things around wheelchair users in particular that outerwear needs to address. But I've got some knitwear coming out. It's coming out in August, so slightly the wrong time of year, but we are looking at knitwear and fabrics like that, and outerwear and coats. But we're still just having to wait until we get to a point where somebody will take enough risk to order in the quantities that we can then produce it.
More and more categories.
Yeah.
But I will check your website on August.
Yes. Well, you'll see it on another very big global distribution site as well in August. That's all I'm allowed to say for now.
Yeah, okay. So thank you for today, sharing all about the Unhidden inclusivity and adaptive design fashion. We learned a lot from you, actually. So may I make this video to different short videos on our social media, because I think your idea are really important for Chinese market. We haven't realized that for a lot of social media platforms. We don't really talk about it. So that's a very good start for Chinese market to learn from the Unhidden.
Perfect. Yeah. Yes, I'd love that.
I will
Thank
put
you.
on
By the way, share the message.
Definitely. Okay, so thank you, Victoria, and we will see you next time. And when you come to China, let's have a hot pot together.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so, so much. It's been a lovely experience working with you.
Okay, so bye-bye, Victoria. Bye-bye. Okay, see you next time. 好的，非常感谢大家的观看。我们今天其实和 Victoria 聊了很多很多的话题啊，我们也谈到了很多现在这样一些小众的品牌也好，或者小众赛道也好面临的问题。我印象比较深刻的是Victoria 她说到在英国在推广的时候会遇到一些数字歧视，在这种数字平台上他没有办法定位他的用户，他也没有办法能够很好的去推广他的产品，他所有的覆盖范围都会被限制。那除此之外呢，有很多关于成本、关于就是这个资金方面的困难。但是纵使有这么多困难，这样的一个兼具使命感的创始人也并没有放弃，毕竟他也是这个行业里面摸爬滚打7、8年的一位资深人士，所以我觉得他的一些想法可能也可以带给我们一些感受，特别是中国有8000万以上的残障人士，他们的需求如果真的被看见且被满足的话我觉得也是一门非常有意思的事业。同时呢刚刚我们做的那个小的挑战，其实 Victoria 她也只能从我们的摄像头里面看到那样一个小小的照片，但是它马上就能够浮现出很多关于这个衣服改造的想法，包括他会考虑到这些穿着上会不会碰到他的头，因为有很多面部受伤的人，包括很多 病人有插管以及造口这样的一些手术处理，那么他穿脱或者是开口或者是治疗是否方便？我觉得这些不仅仅是考虑到了在医疗方面的一些应用，他每次提到这些设计的时候都会提到一个无缝或者是隐藏。那如果你有一天好了，或者你就是一个非常正常的人，那么你穿这些衣服也是完全没有问题的，而且也是非常舒适。希望这些想法和这些新鲜的事物能够带给你一些好的启发。对，那我们今天的直播呢也到此差不多要结束啦。那非常感谢大家的观看。下一期的播也非常有意思啊！下一期我们将会跟猛犸象合作了30年的形象大使一起来聊一聊他对跟猛犸象合作的一些经历，尤其是他的一些测评和在极端环境下的对装备的使用，怎么样去反哺这个品牌，更好的设计他们的产品。这位传奇的登山专业运动员也已经把他的一些照片和他的一些经历准备好了，所以我们2月5号千万不要错过我们的直播。我们这场呢也是一场中国和海外的这样一个连线，所以大家可以继续的来关注我们。如果有任何的问题的话，也可以在后台留言。大家可能会比较好奇，就是我们为什么会做这么多跟海外的连线？因为现在中国的视频直播里面，我相信有很多的中文内容已经足够满足大家，但是世界上有很多有趣的人，所以我们不管国内还是国外，也希望给大家呈现更多的这样一些交流，能够带来一些新鲜的东西，一些创新的东西。这也是 Link 服装创新大会一直在做的。那我们目前呢也已经公布了我们的首批名单，那其中呢就有最近风头正热的在北京开了SKP 开了自己的门店的 Norona 的全球 CEO， 那他也是Norona 的第4代家族传承人。关于 Norona 的话，我有一天在一个视频上有看到一个非常好的概括，就是它是一个真正的把运动第一原理刻在自己专业基因里面的品牌，所以它的每一条线都有它的专业目的，都能够为真正在户外运动切实的保护和各种功能项的需求。当然我说的可能非常的粗略不完整，那大家也可以来现场和我们的创始人和我们的 CEO 来聊一聊，他应该会非常愿意跟大家分享究竟是怎么样做户外才能做到100年。那今天我们也不再多说，非常感谢大家的观看，我们下期再见。2月5号我们和 Stephen 猛犸象的30年形象大使一起来聊一聊登山运动员和品牌之间的合作的故事，共生的故事。拜拜，再见。